Welcome to Understanding Tort Law. My name is Alan Beaver. I'm a professor of law at the Auckland Institute of Technology. I've taught law, including tort law, since 2000, and I've taught at the universities of Auckland, Durham, Southampton, South Australia, Ottawa, and at the Max Planck Institute for International Comparative Law in Hamburg. I've written a significant amount about tort law, including 5 books, and I think it's fair to say that my research has had some significant impact. But none of that's really important. The question is, why am I here? I'm here in the hope of being of assistance to people who want to learn about law. I'll say more about this later, but the key thing about this series is that I'm trying to be useful to students in law schools and to other people who are not in law schools but would just like to know a bit more about the law. And I hope, the key point is I hope you'll find these episodes useful in developing your understanding of the law. Now, the series is called Understanding Tort Law because that's very much our focus, understanding. We're not here to simply learn some rules. Learn some rules and learn how to apply them. That's not what this series is about. This series is about trying to understand what's going on in the case law that we're going to look at. What is tort law all about? What is, say, for example, the law of private nuisance? What is it all about? What is it trying to achieve? Why is it there? How do we rightly decide cases? How do judges decide cases if they're doing it correctly? Are there wrong ways of doing it? Are there better ways of doing it? These are the questions that we're interested in. We're trying to make sense out of what we find in the law books, not simply to learn what was said to us. Now, I need to be upfront right from the beginning. Of course, what you're getting here is my version of things, my take on the law. And naturally, other people have different views, including, if you're a law student, no doubt the person who's teaching you law. Right? That person will have different views than I do. Some of these views I'll discuss, and some of them I won't. But the key point here is this. You must approach these materials as you must approach all materials critically. That doesn't mean you sit there and say, oh, everything Beaver's saying is wrong. But you think about it. Is Beaver right about this? Is there a better way of understanding this? Maybe Beaver's got this right, but maybe he's got that wrong. This kind of inquiring attitude. This is the attitude that you need to take to these lectures. And indeed, it's the attitude you should take to, as I say, to all your study. In fact, to everything in life. Okay, now if you're in a law school, if you're learning law, this material is intended to supplement, but not to replace, right, your coursework at school. So I wouldn't suggest for one moment that you stop attending lectures and tutorials and so on. No, you keep going to those things, but hopefully this will be an additional resource that will be of benefit to you. Now, I'm going to focus on 4 main jurisdictions: England and Wales, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. We'll also look at some American cases, but this isn't really, these aren't really going to be courses on American law, although American students may nevertheless still find them useful, particularly if they're interested in approaching law from a comparative perspective. The most important thing is I hope you find the material useful. I really hope that you'll find it stimulating, that it'll add to your understanding, that it will open up a new way of thinking about law that will help you develop your own views on how the law should best be understood. So our first question to ask in this area is, what is tort law? What is it? And you might also ask, what's it for? What's its purpose? Now, the truth is, I may as well come clean right at the beginning. These aren't easy questions to answer. Sometimes people will talk about the meaning of the word tort and point out that it comes from French. It means twisted or crooked. This is distinct from coming from the German, where it would be a kind of cake. But twisted and crooked doesn't really help us understand anything. It's sometimes said that the law of tort is the law of civil wrongs, but that's not likely to be of much use to you, because what does civil mean? what does a wrong mean in this context? The best thing I think I can do is to explain what would be missing from the law if we didn't have tort law. And that way, you'll get a picture, I think the clearest picture of what tort law is all about. Imagine that you and I are down in the pub, and we have an argument, and I punch you in the face. And let's say that I knock out 3 of your teeth, you suffer a great deal of pain, you have to get a whole lot of dental work that you have to pay for, you miss some time at work and you lose income as a result of this, and so on. Okay, now, it's not going to be news to anybody that what I did to you was illegal. Okay, we generally call it an assault. It's not actually an assault, but that's another matter. But we generally call it an assault. So I assaulted you. We know that what I did was illegal, and we know that as a result of doing that to you, as a result of punching you in the face, I can be arrested by the police, and I can be prosecuted for what I've done. And if I'm found guilty, I can be punished. Okay, so I can be punished in accordance with the rules of the criminal law. I can be fined or imprisoned or what have you. Okay, but if this was the only legal response that the law had to what I did, then there would be something significant missing. And what is that? You wouldn't be able to seek any redress for what happened. I mean, I might get thrown in prison, I might have to pay a fine, but that doesn't do you any good, right? You've suffered all this pain, you've had to pay for this dental work, you've lost income from having to miss time at work. The criminal law is not going to give you any of that back, right? There has to be something else. Now, I should say relatively recently in the law has developed a compensation mechanism through the criminal law, but that's relatively new. Traditionally, that wasn't available. If you wanted to get redress, you had to sue in tort. And it's still the case that in most jurisdictions, I'll come back to this in a second, to get the amount of money that you would want to get from me to redress what I did to you, you're going to have to go to court and sue me in tort law for what happened. The criminal law won't give you redress because the criminal law is concerned about whether I obeyed the rules of my society and punishing me if I don't obey those rules. In the criminal action, to just put it bluntly, it may be a little bit too blunt, but nevertheless, it'll suffice for our purposes, you're little more than a witness. Right? You don't lead the action is led by a prosecution. The result of the action is not that you get anything, you're a witness. So what you need is some way of being represented in front of the court. Right? You've got a complaint. It's not just that society has a complaint about the way I behaved in the pub. You've got a specific complaint about the way I behaved. It was your rights that I violated. And so the law has to recognise some forum in which you can take me to court and complain about my behaviour, and you can get redress for the damage that I wrongfully caused you. Now, the area of the law that allows you to do this is tort law. The punch was a crime, right, and I can be prosecuted by the criminal law for committing the crime. But the punch was also a tort. It's a tort called a battery, and I'm liable to you for it. Right? In the criminal law, I'm responsible to my society. In tort law, I'm responsible to you. You take me to court and sue me because I violated your rights. And as a result, if you succeed, I will have to pay you damages, in this particular case, for the damage that I've done to you. But I will have to compensate you for your medical bills, for the time off work, and for pain and suffering, and for so on. Now, this is very important. It's something that needs to be stressed again and again. To understand tort law, you have to understand it in this interpersonal way. In our example, I have wronged you. You take me to court to sue me, claiming that I have violated your rights, and the remedy is that I have to compensate you. Right? There's an interpersonal character to the tort action that's quite different to the criminal law. Okay, now I need to say that in some jurisdictions, tort law has been replaced by various other schemes. So, for example, in the jurisdiction that I was born in and live in, and I'm currently filming this in New Zealand, you would not be able to take me to court and sue me for a battery, because all personal injury claims have been replaced. That is, they have been barred. You can't sue for personal injury in New Zealand. You can get compensation under a statutory scheme. You get compensation from what's known as the Accident Compensation Corporation. Now, I'm going to, for the most part in these lectures, I'm going to ignore this. And I'm going to ignore this for two reasons. The obvious reason is these courses are not only for New Zealanders, right? They are for people, right, who don't have an Accident Compensation Corporation. Right. The other reason, though, is I think if New Zealanders want to understand tort law, they're best off pretending at the beginning that ACC doesn't exist. I think, other people feel differently, but I think the only way to learn tort law is to learn it as if there were no alternative compensation systems, and then to learn about the compensation systems afterwards. You have to understand tort law in this way. Otherwise it won't make any sense to you. So for the moment, we're going to pretend that ACC doesn't exist. But of course, please don't forget that it actually does exist if you happen to be a New Zealander, right? Especially when it comes to writing your exams. Okay, and while we're on this jurisdictional thing, I'm just going to say in passing here that I'm going to refer to the person who brings the claim as the plaintiff, not as the claimant, as people are required to do in the United Kingdom. And the reason for that is simply because the UK is the odd jurisdiction, England and Wales, I should say, is the odd jurisdiction out in this context. The rest of us around the common law world refer to it as plaintiff, so I'm going to refer to it as plaintiff. Now, at this stage, I'm not going to say anything more about tort law. A lot of people will tell you that this is a mistake, that the best thing, if you pick up a textbook, for example, you'll see that invariably, the first chapter, the first two chapters maybe, contains a discussion of what tort law is for, what it's all about, and so on. And people often tell me that this is how I should begin my lectures. I should begin by explaining what tort law is for and what it's all about. But I actually don't think that that's a good way to start. And I don't think it's a good way to start for two reasons. First of all, I think if I told you what I think tort law is about, it won't make a lot of sense to you. And I think when students read those first chapters of textbooks, it doesn't make much sense to them either. The best way, I think, of coming to grips with what tort law is about is to examine tort law in action, to look at some actual cases and see what happened. So that's the first reason. I think it's actually easier if you don't spend a lot of time talking about what tort law is at the beginning. You just get stuck into it. The second reason is that if I now tell you what tort law is and what it's all about, I'm just getting in my indoctrination right at the beginning. I'm only going to tell you what I think it's all about. And that's not what I want to happen at all. I want you to discover along with me what tort law is all about. Now, of course, as I say, as we go along, I'm going to give you my view, but at least if I'm giving you my view in the context of the cases, you're able to say, yeah, I'm not sure Beaver's right about that. Maybe there's a better way of understanding it. Whereas if I just, pronounce ex cathedra from the beginning, this is what tort law is all about, you're not really in a position to approach my presentation critically. So I'm not going to say anything more general about tort law. Now, we're going to discover tort law, what it is all about, what it's for, what its purposes are, what it's trying to achieve. We're going to answer these questions for ourselves as we go through the material. Okay, so now just a word here about the nature of these lectures. So I'm just going to talk to you. There are pictures and diagrams and so forth that I'll have for you. All of these, the slides that I put up, are going to be available to download from the link. The link is down in the show notes below. There's also, I'm going to refer to cases, and I have prepared extracts from the cases for you to read, which ideally you would read before listening to my lectures, and they are going to be also down in the show notes. Now, let me just finish by saying that I really hope that this material is going to be useful for you. If it is, please like the videos, and if they are useful for you, please subscribe so that you can be made aware of new videos. Thanks very much for watching.